So welcome. I've been, it's nice to be back in the facilitator role. My speech is a little slurred because of the medications I'm taking, but I'll apologize once in advance for that. I will tell you in a little bit about why I chose this article, but Erace is an organization. Oh, I don't have I'm going to ask someone to read the land acknowledgement because I don't have it on Cindy's computer. In a minute, Erace is an organization that allows a diverse group of people to discuss the difficult topic of racism. And everyone raise his hand, I'll keep a list, their hand, and I'll keep a list, and you have 2 minutes to speak. And then people want to ask a clarifying question, which is indeed a clarifying question, not a new topic. They raise 2 fingers, and we have 2 people per speaker to ask clarifying questions. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in the order I see on my screen. So Marva.
I'm Marva. I've become the Sue Erace post-Katrina, and I look forward to such lively discussions, which include history and active events.
Thank you, Marva.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nancy?
Not yet, anyway.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Moore. I've been coming to Erace since June of 2007.
Great. Phyllis?
Good morning, I'm Phyllis. I've been coming to Erace since the summer of 2008, and I can read the land acknowledgement whenever you're ready.
Yeah, read the land acknowledgement while you're on the speaker.
Okay. We acknowledge that what we know as the United States is the traditional territory of indigenous peoples. Members of our group today are on the lands of the Tonkawan, Lipan, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, the Chitimacha in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Lenape and Piscataway in Maryland, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, and the Cahuilla and Mojave in Riverside, California, and also the Lumbee in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Sorry. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through generations, and we state our intention to continue that stewardship now and into the future.
Thank you, Phyllis. I want to mention that Becky Richardson is tied up. She's trying to sell her house, so she's been tied up on Saturdays. She misses the group, and she'll hope to get back soon. Lynn, with an L.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Frank from New Orleans. I first joined the group in the summer of 2019, before we knew anything about pandemics. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Nora?
Morning, everybody. I'm Nora. I'm in Austin, and I've been coming for almost a year. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Pedro?
Yeah, I'm outside of Austin. I've been coming to these meetings not long enough, and looking forward to the discussion today. And good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Pedro. Cindy? You need to unmute.
It got remuted. I had unmuted it. Anyway,
Cindy Morse. I'm in New Orleans, kind of close to Bill. I'm actually married to Bill, but been coming to Erace even longer. I don't know, so about 6 years. I need to go find out. Anyway, glad to see you all. It's a beautiful day here, but it's sure not December. Feels like it's supposed to be, but it's not. So looking forward to a good holiday and looking forward to seeing you all every Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Reverend Larry?
Good morning, I'm Larry, and I'm glad to be here. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you. Teresa?
Good morning. I'm Teresa. I'm coming from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And since I'm a graduate of UNC, I just want to say go Tar Heels.
Yeah. Great. Maria? Marla, I'm sorry, I misread.
That's
I should
okay.
know your name.
Frequently happens. My name's Marla. I've been coming to Erace for the last few years, and I will say Rock Shock Jayhawk, Woo Pig Suey, and make sure you go vote in Louisiana if you haven't.
Thank you. Glenn with a G?
Glenn Abdullah from New Orleans, and I've been coming to Erace since 1994. And I'm looking forward to today's meeting. Peace be unto everyone.
Thank you, Glenn. Greer?
My name is Greer. I've been coming to Erace since I think 2008. And I'm ready to get started with this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. I look forward to your and everyone's comments. I chose this article because it has personal meaning for me. And there's two main reasons for affirmative action. The court doesn't seem to understand that, at least some members. So it's helping children from oppressed and underserved communities get a better education. But it also helps everyone to have a better, more diverse school environment. And the three liberal judges on the case, I'm quoting from the article, that affirmative actions that carefully tailored affirmative action plans are justified in order to ensure there's a diverse student body, which in turn produces better scientists, businessmen, women, and teachers. People who work better with others and are better able to be leaders. Of course, the court's conservative judges weren't buying into that because they have totally abdicated any sense of fairness, in my opinion. And they're trying to create a white nationalist evangelical country. And so that's then they said that even Justice Roberts, who tries to appear to be reasonable, he lied and said without qualification or facts that Asian Americans have been victims of discrimination in both of the schools in question. But he's been that way all along. So I realized that diversity helped my education in a number of ways. I'm sorry, I'm coughing. I went to school in the segregated South, so it was all white schools. The first time I went to school with Black students was in Syracuse, public high school in Syracuse, New York. And that wasn't a transition for the high school, it had been that way for a long time. But the reason I had a number of Black students in my high school was, in addition to being unsegregated or integrated, there was busing. So there was busing from two areas into my school, which is in a predominantly white middle-class neighborhood near the Syracuse University, where my father taught. There were students from central Syracuse who were predominantly African American, and students from East Syracuse, which are predominantly white children of recent immigrants, primarily from Italy and Poland. So I was exposed to two groups of people that I hadn't been exposed to much in New Orleans, in school at least. And that was helpful. But also, my college, which was a small New England college, believed in diversity in the student body in multiple ways. And one way helped me because I did not get very good grades in high school, but I had good SAT tests. And the reason I didn't get good grades is because the anti-Southern bias by my public school administrators, who felt that my Southern education didn't amount to anything. So they kept me out of AP classes. Anyway, my college wanted geographic diversity as well as racial and cultural. And so I was probably one of the few applicants from upstate New York. But the geographic diversity was a great adjunct to my college education because I met kids from all over the country. My college also had Black kids and kids from other minorities. So we love living in diversity. We love living in New Orleans, and we thankful to live in a diverse city. So I'm going to start the questions now.
I'm gonna ask you a question. Am I the only one seeing Bill freeze? Or just if everybody else seeing him freezing and pausing?
No, he's flowing fine for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm Glenn, to answer your question, I mentioned before you came on that in using Cindy's computer because my camera is broken. So as a facilitator, I want you to be able to see me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so hers freezes up.
Cindy
No.
is using my computer with the cameras broken. That's why you only see her name.
No, Glenn, you're the one freezing. No one else is freezing.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So the list is open.
All right. I
So-
guess I didn't want to start out.
So I got Nancy, Glenn, and Teresa. Anyone else? Okay.
I just wanted to start off with a comment about it's about affirmative action, but it's more about Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas has always been against affirmative action. All right. And in his I read two books about him. I don't know if it's in the autobiography or if it's in the biography written about him. But the reason that he's against affirmative action is because he went to private schools all of his life. His grandfather was able to afford to send him to private schools, and he went to all white private schools most of his life, and was pretty much, only Black person in school. And he was told all of his life, he was an excellent student, straight A student, but he was told that the only reason that he was there was because of affirmative action, and that he, other than that, he wouldn't have been admitted. He wasn't smart enough. I mean, clearly, if you're a straight A student, what does affirmative action have to do with that? Nothing. I mean, your grades are your grades. And so he's always felt like Black people don't need, or minorities don't need affirmative action. They should always be able to get into school based on their merit, without realizing that, maybe some people, even though they have good grades, still don't get into schools, and they need affirmative action to ensure that certain segments of the population are admitted to the schools, particularly if they receive government funds. That's it.
Thank you. Greer, do you have a qualifying, a question, or you want to get it on the list?
I want to get on a list.
You're on it. So now it's Glenn.
You say Glenn or Lynn?
Glenn with a G.
All right. Well, I'm not quite sure I'm on board with the affirmative action. Now, I looked at the video, and it said that the Asians having no problem getting their numbers in there. They're not being discriminated against, and they're competing. They're competing hard to get in there with their grades. And how many more hundreds of years, I know, as far as Black Americans are concerned, we should be doing this for the next 1,000 years, being on affirmative action. Affirmative action, if we put that in sports, we would be screaming, because we would be the best players, and they would put inferior players because their numbers aren't they're not showing enough diversity. So, when is affirmative action going to end? If it's only, why don't they just do it across the board on everything? Why don't they bring it into sports? And you will see that we will say it is unfair. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Glenn. Teresa?
Thank you. So as I indicated in my intro, I am an alumni from Carolina. I went there from 88 to 92, and the entire 4 years, I was always made to feel as if I had displaced a more qualified white student. I heard that exact friggin' phrase all 4 years. Black students displaced because of affirmative action. And it doesn't matter whether, in my high school, which was a very diverse, because I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, to military bases, people really from all over the country. I was in what was called back then accelerated classes, but that didn't really matter because, looking at the color of my skin, you couldn't tell that I was an honor student. That I think I shared at a past meeting how my first freshman, or like fall semester, a white co-ed said to me, "Teresa, you don't talk like a Black person." So I would like to say that affirmative action, helping to create diverse populations, is good for those white students who basically grew up in white schoolings. And at the time that she said it, I felt insulted. I couldn't say anything because her whole demeanor was as if she had given me a compliment. And that was the first of what has gone on to be many insulting compliments or microaggressions I've received because I'm an educated Black person who speaks English. That's a really low bar, but for someone to be so forthcoming about, wow, you could do this basic thing that anyone who has exposure to formal education could do, that type of attitude, when we talk about combating racism or attitudes for a lot of white students, and I thought she was sheltered, by the way, when she's like, wow, she has not grown up around Black people, she must be sheltered. I didn't realize that that phenomenon, being white and being able to live in pretty much all white spaces, or maybe if they did see Black people, it was in some lesser than but not equal position. I will get back on the list, but I hear the timer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Okay, we have the list. We have Greer and Teresa. Anyone else want to get on? And Larry. Anyone else? Okay. So Greer, Teresa, and Larry. Greer, it's your turn.
Okay. I remember when Abigail Fisher, she sued because she wanted to get into the University of Texas at Austin. Mind you, they guaranteed 92% of in-state spots to people who graduated in the top 10% of their class. So that's a benefit. She didn't meet the requirements on several levels and tried to base the fact that she didn't get in on Black students. But even with the Black students, she didn't fit the qualifications because they had higher GPAs than her and they did better on the SATs than her. People are saying that you don't need the help. I'm not saying that the help isn't needed because of the bias and racism that goes along with being a person in this country. We're looking at the Supreme Court, and it seems to be they don't think racism exists. But people forget that colleges have legacies that guarantee spot to kids who parents were able to go there. So if my parent wasn't able to get into a certain college that I wanted to go to, I'm going to lose a potential spot because their parents was able to go there. So let's be fair. We just had a whole big scandal where people were paying to make up fake bios for their children to get into colleges, where they actually went to jail for. They were stealing scholarships by fabricating stories. So when racism goes away and when people stop doing things legislated and not legislated that go against a person based solely on color, then I won't have a problem with affirmative action. That's it.
Yeah, your uncle has a question for you.
Go right ahead.
Yes, you were saying about how some people who had went to the college previously and they are donors or something to the college, their children get in special.
Yes.
Okay, so is that discrimination, or is that that hurts anybody who's trying to get into that college?
That's discrimination, but nobody's talking about that. They're talking about affirmative action. So if we're going to be fair, then all potential boosts.
I should have said not discrimination, but racism. Is that racism when it affects all people who wants to get into that college?
It doesn't matter if it's racism because it's affecting everybody. But see, what you're not getting is nobody's talking about that. but you're worrying about racism. You got legacies, you have endowment, people giving a lot of money. So everybody's being affected by that, like you said. But again, that's not what we're talking about. But yet, that too is a part of the problem. And that's been going on way longer than affirmative action. But that wasn't a problem for white America. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Greer. Any more questions? So it's Teresa now.
All right, this is not my first time discussing, I'm sure for most people, affirmative action, and I came up with an endpoint because if we keep something nebulous, then it's just like, oh, when can it end? And I think Supreme Court Justice Barrett said, well, when does this end? When affirmative action should have an endpoint? And it's like, oh, I wish I knew how to get in contact with her because I got an endpoint for her. When zip codes no longer accurately reflect the racial makeup of people living in that zip code, that's when we will no longer need affirmative action. That is zip codes are used as a proxy for racism. So that's when, in my mind, affirmative action can end. As long as zip codes still reflect the demographics or the racial makeup of people living in that zip code, we still need affirmative action to combat that. And when that Becky scandal broke out, the first thing I said is, I wish that would have happened when I was at Carolina, because that would have been my, yeah, you're talking about this me displacing a more qualified white applicant. What about you mediocre rich people who are displacing more qualified people of color who are going from this school? So I do agree with well, the name on the screen is Gigi. I don't know if you go by Greer, I'm not sure, but I wholeheartedly agree. They never talk about the systems which perpetuate white supremacy as being race quotas. That's I just remember Jesse Helms, because once again, I grew up in North Carolina talking about race quotas, but they never talk about the good old boy system and how people of color are locked out, such as those legacy positions. So thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Good timing. So it's Larry now.
Yes, I have mixed feelings on affirmative action. From the standpoint of diversity, yes, I can agree with it. But in the cases that's gone before the Supreme Court, I think the colleges are arguing that diversity, that race is just one factor that can be considered. But like the makeup of the Supreme Court itself, it helps to have a Ketanji Jackson on there to balance the views of a conservative court, or like eracism. Why would we want everybody that's a part of eracism to think alike and to look alike and to talk alike? And that we choose to shut out. If I express the views of racism from a Christian perspective, why should I be shut out? And accused of bringing religion in, or if somebody else want to discuss it from the standpoint of being a Muslim, or from being an atheist, we should be open to everyone's points of view. So from the standpoint of diversity, I don't see anything wrong with affirmative action if it seeks to correct historical wrongs. But at the same token, I would want us to think that, Black achievement is based only on affirmative action. I mean, I went to a small Black college in Jacksonville, Florida, that I would feel 100% certain that none of you never heard of, Edward Waters College. And I remember a professor telling me down there that he felt that I could compete with students from any college in America. But if I were to graduate and I showed my diploma against someone from Yale, I'm sure they would choose the Yale person unless I prove myself otherwise. Okay, thank you. I'll get back on the list.
Thank you. So we have Cindy, Glenn. Glenn, did you have your hand up to speak or a question?
To speak.
Okay, and then I see Greer. So it's Cindy, Glenn, Larry, and Greer. So Cindy, it's your turn. Cindy,
I'm here.
you were unmuted for a minute and then you remuted.
Okay. My brain is not working very well these days. One of the dilemmas for this whole question is the cost of college. Now, I was a legacy for a small college in upstate New York where my mother had gone, but I don't think I kept out a qualified anybody. But that's irrelevant. The point is, the cost of college when I went to college, which was a long time ago, and the cost of college now, it's just not even comparable. It's so expensive. So if you're not rich, going to college is a big deal. There are lots of scholarships and all that, but finding those is a whole nother question. It takes a person at high schools that have high scoring kids, white or black or any other color. You need somebody to help kids find a way in because it's not just self-evident. And I think it's important that there be a diversity. I grew up in North Carolina, near Fayetteville, ironically, yes. I lived in Washington most of my life. Well, when I was a kid. So you have a view from where you grow up. But colleges were supposedly giving you a broader perspective, and it did for me to cross all those states, even though I had grown up knowing that's where I probably would go because my mother had been there. It's healthy to be with a mixed group that you didn't always know and to be in a different part of the country, I thought. So that was my values reflecting where I went to college. But the cost of going there, for me, it was workable. I mean, it was a long time ago. Going there now is a whole nother thing. So colleges, fortunately, have increased their scholarship availability, but I don't know how careful they are about who gets the scholarships. I hope they are, but I don't know. Thanks. There's the button.
So Glenn, it's your turn.
Yes. Yeah, we don't. There are examples whereby whites came into something that was dominated by African Americans, and African Americans were outraged by it. In New Orleans, there was a union, a longshoremen's union called the ILA, and a lesser white union of longshoremen wanted to integrate into that African American one, which the African American one was rich, had plenty of assets, and they didn't want those whites coming in there. But the courts allowed them to come in because of discrimination. So we are going to get parity when we do some of the same things that other groups have done, like the Irish. They built Notre Dame. We have in New Orleans Dillard University, a fine, great university owned and run by African Americans. We have to do more of that. Our African American people who are business people and are rich going to have to just stop making money for show, and put some of that money back into their poorly needed community to build great colleges for us that can rival any college in America. We have to do like other groups done, and stop being always crying at the white man's table begging for crumbs.
Thank you, Glenn. It's Larry now.
There was a book written, I think about 80 years ago, by Carter G. Woodson, who was the founder of the original Negro History Week that has grown to become, I think, Black History Month or African American History Month, one of them. But anyway, he wrote that book that is very relevant to today. And it's called The Miseducation of the Negro. You know, and one of our great problems is that our minds need to be transformed. That we shouldn't seek parity or equality with those who have historically suppressed us, but we should seek excellence, even within the framework of what we have been gifted with and blessed with. You know, we have HBCUs all across America that could be perfected, that should be able to compete with a Harvard or Yale or Princeton or any others. Think of Deion Sanders, for instance, when he went to Jackson State and did what he did, a top recruited quarterback who was committed to another university changed his mind and went to Jackson State with Deion Sanders. Think of a Cornell West or Michael Eric Dawson, or that top physicist, Tyson, I think his name is, could be mistaken on that. But if these people would come to some of these HBCUs and lend their talents, those HBCUs could, could be just as attractive as a Yale. So we still might be in the stage of the miseducation of the Negro, and our minds need to be transformed. And we begin to excel in what we have been blessed with in all these HBCUs across America. Thank you.
Larry, would you like to get back on the list?
I'm sorry. Did the bell go off? I'm sorry. I don't mean to.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. I don't mean to disrespect the bell. No, not right now. Just leave me off for now.
Oh, so now we have Greer, and then the list is open. Okay. So Greer, it's your turn.
Okay. I went to a private Catholic college. I had to compete to get in. I come from a family. I mean, I say we fared better than most post-slavery. But I'm going to say this, everybody does not have that same advantage. And that's due to the history of African Americans in this country. When I got into the college and I finally got into my major, I was only one of 3 African Americans. And when I graduated, I was only one of 11 African Americans. But I appreciated one thing that happened once I got into my major, because I'm sure people around there felt that I shouldn't be there. The dean of my college came into the classroom during the first day I started my major and stated, everyone who's in here deserves to be here. Our average GPA in that class was a 3.2. My GPA was a 3.66. I had advantages because I remember when I was a kid, I knew I was going to college when I was 5 and 6. Maybe I didn't know exactly what college was, but I knew it. I had an uncle named Vernon who went to Dillard. And then he went to the service. Then he continued his education. I had my aunt who took me to class with her as a child. Every summer I was at Southern University sitting in a chair next to my aunt. Then when I got to that age, I did the same thing with my younger cousins. Everybody does not have that advantage. Everybody does not have that access. Everybody does not have the foresight, if it's not even a part of their family, who's struggling just to survive.
Hey, Greer, you want to get back on the list?
I'll let you know. Thanks.
Yeah, but the list is open.
All right, you can put me on there.
Larry and
Put me
Glenn
back. Put me back.
and Teresa and Glenn.
Did you say my name?
Yeah, you're on the list.
All right.
You want to be?
Yes.
Yeah, so Larry, Teresa, Glenn, and there was one other person. Oh, Greer. Okay,
Okay,
Larry, it's your
again,
turn.
again, from the standpoint of diversity, affirmative action is good. Even in the cases that's pending before the Supreme Court, if you had a white, young, Southern, racist young man who grew up in a racist environment around racist people, and he went to, say, Yale University, he's in college now, and all he met in his classrooms was people who thought like him. It would be good for the college to have a diverse student body so that this young white man could be exposed to other points of views and other cultures to the betterment, from the standpoint of the betterment of society. Yes, affirmative action would be good, but it must be understood that affirmative action is only meant to get one's feet in the door and not to have an unqualified person to be in the classroom, or not to have an unqualified person to hold down a job. Once they get in the classroom, once they get that job, then they have to prove themselves. But considering the history of America, I don't think anything is wrong with having something in place that will give a person access to an opportunity that they may never have had. Thank you.
Good. Teresa, it's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to put in the chat, somebody said something about, well, there were a couple of comments about Black universities and college, or HBSUs, that we may have never heard of. And that reminded me of Malcolm Gladwell's take on how biased the US News and World Report college rankings are. So I put that in there. Again, the systemic racism, even in something like that, people tend to look at numbers and think, oh, well, numbers can't lie. If the computer figures it out, then there couldn't be any bias in the coding, which they most certainly is. The person who is coding puts their bias into the codes, but I put that in there. And also to say, when Kamala Harris became vice president, she went to Howard University. So there was also a boost, but it always takes something unusual to boost. It's not like baked in the cake. And I wanted to circle back. There was some comment about how Asians get in without affirmative action. And I just think about that whole model minority. They are getting a boost because of their race. And that community has been outspoken to even talk about how, even though it's called the model minority, that bias has hurt their community. So nobody's getting anything for free or what have you. But I know this isn't the discussion about model minorities or whatever, but I do find it interesting that when you have something like other populations, the arguments I always hear about are about the Asian community and also about how Italians used to be discriminated against, but they were able to successfully put themselves under the umbrella of whiteness. Black people have not been able to do that unless we pass as white. We can't just be
Lisa,
Black
you
and
want
get that
to,
benefit. I'll wait. I'll wait. If
that's
the
fine.
spirit moves me, I'll get back on the list. Thank you.
Yeah, great. It's hard for me to interrupt people because I want to hear more. But anyway, Glenn, it's your turn.
Well, I ain't kind of forgot what I wanted to say. Something Greer said that I had that she said I wanted to address, but anyway, uh, yeah, Teresa is right. You know, anybody got a little color, they get a little boost in getting into the college or anything else. But yeah, about the oh yeah, everybody. Yeah, Greer say everybody don't have access to this or born with a silver spoon in their mouth. No. Uh, uh, you, uh, I don't have any great formal education, but I can compete with any mind that's on this uh, that's on this program right now. So saying that because you don't have this and you don't have that, as long as you got a will and a mind, you can change your condition. Uh, but you never get anything if you don't strive for it. And just having some, getting some extra points or some waivers because of your color, that destroys you, that weakens you, that make you don't build up any muscles, no mental and spiritual and willpower muscle when you have somebody just let you in. Now about diversity, this is not 1940. There's plenty of diversity all over the place. Plenty. You mean to tell me college is the only place that people gonna have diversity even before they even get to college?
Glenn, I'm sorry to
That's
interrupt.
it.
The
All right.
timer went off a little back. Do you want to get back on the list?
Let me make some notes first, and I'll let you know.
So Phyllis, I see your hand up. And so it's Greer and then Phyllis. We have time for a few more. So Greer, it's your turn. And I see Larry.
Can I go?
Okay, Greer.
Okay. I never said anything about a silver spoon to my uncle. What I said was having access to. If your family's not education minded, then you may not be exposed to certain things. We're all born at different stations in life. How many people who are born to drug addicts who are just trying to survive? That's just an example. I'm not saying everyone is. You think they're worried about school? No, they're worried about trying to survive. And with getting into colleges, like Reverend Larry said, or even jobs, we're talking, let's go outside of. Nobody's talking about the money that's tied to affirmative action. and how universities and colleges are benefiting off of that, how companies benefit off affirmative action. Mind you, let's talk about the corporate world with affirmative action. That doesn't guarantee you a job in a top office making millions of dollars. Affirmative action only requires that they hire people who work for the corporation. And that could be in the cafeteria. That could be the janitorial staff. If you have 50 people,
I see.
huh? You say something, Bill?
Sorry to interrupt, Greer. I just was acknowledging Nancy.
Oh,
Keep
okay.
going.
Okay, yeah. So it's not about just getting into the college. By right, yes, you have to finish. You have to use that spot. You have to attain. But if you can't even get in the door, you don't have that opportunity. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Phyllis and Larry and Nancy and probably time for two more. Phyllis, it's your turn. I see Lynn with an L.
Yeah, put me on there too, behind Lynn with the L.
Okay, so the list is closed now. So Larry, Nancy, Lynn with an L, and Glenn with a G. So Larry, it's your turn.
It's Phyllis's
Oh,
turn.
Phyllis, I think Phyllis was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misread my list. Phyllis, it's your turn.
Thank you. So I want to say any, and I'm just going to say Black kid who gets accepted into a college isn't being given anything. Their grades have to be on par with any, and I'll just say white student also trying to get into the college. They're not just saying, oh, move this student to the top because they're Black. They have to be Black. They have to have had their community service hours that they do in high school now. They have to have the grade. They have to have, you know, outside activities. It's not just
see you,
because
Glenn.
they're Black. I see you, Glenn. I'm not done talking. I think it's really an unfair thing to perpetuate the stereotype that Black kids who get into college because of affirmative action are somehow less than their white cohort. They actually have to be better than their white cohort to get considered, affirmative action or not. Okay, Glenn, what's your question?
Well, that's not true. That they get in there without the grades. They
I don't
do
hear
get
a
in
question. I
in
hear
there
a
without.
statement. Do you want to wait till you get on the list?
Oh yeah. Well. Tell me how Herschel Walker got you high school and college.
Well, you know as well as I do that people with talent in sports get passes that other students don't. So that's not really a gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wonder how he got through school listening to me speak. Okay. Nancy, it's your turn.
I have so many different avenues that I could go in what I'm about to say. I know 2 minutes won't cover it, but I'll try to give the best example that I can. I used to work for Old Dominion University, and I have many examples of how you can get into the club but not be in the club, if that makes sense. I used to work for the computer science department, and while they would have one Black student, maybe two, I only really remember one, in the master's program of computer science, they never had like they would have an Asian professor, they would have an Eastern European professor, they would have, what was another one? Middle Eastern professors, and they would all mentor the students that were in the program. So each individual ethnicity or minority would have a mentor. They never had a Black mentor. They never had a Black faculty member to mentor the Black students. So the Black students were kind of left on their own to find their way, and a lot of they would fail and flunk out. And that's kind of one of the ways they get into the program. All right, maybe they have to have a quota, they have 1 or 2 Black students in the program, but then they don't give them any resources to help them get through the program as they give other students. And that's another reason that they fail. Okay, so there's a lot of that goes on when you get accepted in as a quota, to meet a quota. Then you're not given any resources. And exactly the same thing happens in employment. Okay, as a college, yes, certain percentage of your employees have to be of certain ethnicities, right? But if you are like working in food service, or you're working in facilities or janitorial service, you count just as much as somebody who is an administrator. And that's the thing that you don't see. You're looking at numbers, but you're not looking at the positions that these people are in. And it was always the case where the lower level employees were Black, doing all the work, and the upper level employees were white, sitting on their butt, doing nothing.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. That's
Right.
still true today.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's very true today. So Lynn with an L is next.
Did you miss Larry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did indeed. It was my mistake in counting. Thank you for mentioning it. Larry, it's your turn now.
Okay, just very quickly, Martin Luther King's approach, was basically that a house divided against itself cannot stand. A nation divided against itself ultimately cannot stand, even in the face of what might seem to be success and prosperity and power and greed. This nation cannot stand if it continues on its present course. And I had some kickback a few weeks ago when I said that very little has changed in America. And when I say very little has changed, that means the system is still in place that created a lot of the most of the problems that we still experience in America. The system is still in place. Yes, there are many success stories. You got more Black millionaires in Atlanta than anywhere else in America, but you also have poverty in Atlanta. Neighborhoods right outside of rich neighborhoods living in abject poverty. And so diversity must be a part of this country, not the nation, this country moving forward. And it's not going to be done by necessarily carving out 10 states in the South and say these 10 states are going to be set aside for a Black nation. We're in this boat in spite of our wicked history, the wicked history of America. America's in the same ship, and we're going to either sink together, or we're going to float together. Right now, we're sinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next is Lynn with an L.
I surely agree with Reverend Larry that I wish we were all appreciating each other and working to create a better country instead of fomenting resentment and scapegoating against small groups so that the people in power can stay in power. But I also wanted to express my deep anger and horror at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is supposed to be the highest version of legal thinking in the country. They're supposed to be people that you can look up to solve difficult problems. And we have a bunch of, I won't say fools because they're very smart, but they're very cunning to support an evil system. They call themselves originalist. as if what the founding fathers had to say about Black people should guide us for all time when they were slave owners, as if the founding fathers should guide us on using guns when all they had were muskets. And they didn't have children going to school in anger and blowing away their classmates. The Constitution is supposed to be a living, changing document that creates more freedom and more opportunity and more happiness for all. I cannot stand the way the Supreme Court says we cannot look at race in any form or fashion to create a remedy. And if you don't look at race, they are not looking at the racial systems that are still in place. They're acting as if they don't exist. And that's why they can say, oh, we can allow the states to create any voting rules that they want to because race is not a problem. We are colorblind now. So I just want to say thumbs down to the Supreme Court and those people who are using their Catholic doctrine to tell me how to live my life and using the conservative doctrine to limit a generous system of rights for all people in our country.
Thank you, Lynn. I agree with everything you said. So now it's Glenn's turn, and then we'll move to wrap up. And I have at least 4 people who haven't spoken. Glenn, you go first now.
Yes. I don't think our biggest obstacle is whether we can get into a church, into a university based on race. That's not our real issue. It's really our thinking. We don't think like, well, just put it frankly. We don't think like normal people. Slavery took something out of us that we have not got back. When we first came over here, we had it, but it got beat out of us. We were made to feel inhuman, and we were treated in a way and educated in a way to just be happy being a slave. And that effect is still on us. We shouldn't be dependent so much on another people like we depended on them. We should be able to make our own way in this country without having to change our skin color. We could our numbers. It's enough the white man is the one that's providing all the jobs for us. With that, we can build something. We do have access to trillions of dollars of spending power, but we don't, since we aren't normal. We are not normal. Because we are not normal, we don't spend that money in a constructive way to help move us up. Now that's where I don't see where none of y'all can compete with me when you in that kind of thinking.
Thank you, Glenn. We're going to move to the wrap-up phase, and I have at least 4 names who haven't spoken. They'll get 2 minutes. I have Marla, Nora, and Pedro. Did I miss someone? Okay. Marva, it's your turn for 2 minutes.
Very interesting discussion. I respect all your views. I disagree with some views. I'm not going to debate at this time on the views I disagree with. Very interesting discussion. Um, Bill, I don't know if I told you that Syracuse High, my brother Vernon, graduated from Dillard. That was his first job after college. But he stayed there and died there, being vice principal at Syracuse High. I came from family of 9 siblings. We were motivated by family members to succeed in education. I've had 14 nurses, 1 doctor, and 2 respiratory therapists in my family. My family instilled then about caring people. My grandmother instilled that in us. She was the neighborhood unofficial nurse. She cared for the neighbors and family members. That's what I attribute that to, a caring spirit that instilled in us.
So Marva,
Thank you.
I'll let you go on a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Nora, it's your turn for 2 minutes.
That's scary, 2 minutes. So let's see if I can make sense of my notes. So if it wasn't such a serious issue, it'd be laughable that people are complaining about the unfairness of affirmative action. And it makes me want to tell people to sit with that, see how that feels, that unfairness. Just feel what it feels like to think that something has been unfair to you. And then I wonder about how affirmative action is working anyway, kind of like what Nancy was referring to. How in reality, how is affirmative action really working? And so instead of arguing about affirmative action, we should be talking about the shame of needing it in the first place. And that's it.
Thank you. Marla, it's your turn. And then Pedro.
Yeah, great discussion. I echo a lot of the things that folks said, Len, about the Supreme Court and just being so profoundly disturbed about its direction. And Nancy, one thing that really resonated with me that you said about once folks get into school, how difficult it is to navigate school itself from that point. And that just kind of reminded me of my daughter and what she has said. She's noticed about some Black students and some Hispanic students at University of Arkansas as well, that, you know, it seems like it's harder for those folks to build community and to navigate, and that is with affirmative action, right? So imagine without, how those people are profoundly affected. I also wanted to add, she told me some interesting things that, you know, she's friends with people from all over the country and actually all over the world. She's really fortunate to live in the international dorm, and mentioned that some of her friends who are white, most of them are from Texas and affluent suburbs in Texas. And they have commented that, you know, wow, I mean, we've never really spent time around Black folks. And my daughter found that so interesting and so kind of foreign because of growing up in the New Orleans area and going to the school that she went to here and having exposure. So I know exposure isn't everything. It's just the tip of the iceberg, but I think it certainly matters. And I'm hoping that for some of those kids, that it could be the beginning of a transformative experience for them. And I don't understand how anybody could argue that diversity doesn't improve things, doesn't make things better. And that's what I think saying no to affirmative action does. That's it. Thanks for a great discussion.
You. Pedro, it's your turn for 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. I'm always interested in Glenn's in that he reminds us of what it is to be human, to have a mind and to have will. That those two things together create a potential in the human species from the cerebral cortex that we have that's larger in proportion than any other animal's cerebral cortex, the rest of the brain, to our potentials as humans. So there's no denying that, but there's also no denying the crime of denying the human potential to so many. And I think anytime you address the symptoms of a problem and not the root problem, your problem always remains. And I appreciated what Nora said about the shame of actually needing affirmative action. But affirmative action is not the cure. It ameliorates some of the inequities, but it's things like reparations and some of the great leaders that we have now pushing for things that in baby bonds and those types of things to equal this wealth inequality thing. Because if you don't have wealth, then you deny people the material access, or at least you inhibit it to gain the material access to meet the minimum needs of dignity, the minimum needs of nutrition that without it robs the brain of its human potential. The freedom from poverty, the freedom from hunger, the freedom from anxiety generated from unmet human basic needs. That's what this systemic system, the root of this problem, generates, that if they're not addressed concurrently, then the problem will always remain as most people probably want it, if they want to preserve their wealth, superiority, and privilege in this country and in this world.
Thank you, Pedro. We are now going to the 1 minute portion. And I'm going to go in the order I see people on my screen. So Teresa, you go first for a minute.
Can you come back to me? I'm trying to find a link that I want to share with everyone.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Nancy, for a minute.
Very interesting topic. I mean, there's just so many different avenues that we could go down when it comes to affirmative action, the Supreme Court, the effect of affirmative action or the reality of affirmative action and diversity. There's so many different ways that you could go. And so each one of those could be a topic of their own, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Phyllis, it's your turn for a minute.
Well, this isn't a fully thought out thing, but I just think there might be some thread between white people's reactions to affirmative action and some white people's reactions to Brittany Griner being released from Russia. That there's some I've seen posts that, why didn't they free the Marine, who's a white guy, the hero Marine? And they don't seem to realize that hero was discharged from the Marines for bad conduct for larceny. So he's no hero in, I think, most people's ways of figuring who's a hero. But the fact that she's a Black queer woman who was caught with a tiny minuscule amount of oil, it's, and, Russia wasn't offering the former Marine. They're keeping him because he's got, I'll just finish. He's got ties to 4 countries, Canada, the UK, Ireland, and us, that are all allies with the Ukraine. So it's not in their best interest to release him. But yeah, I'm very happy Brittany Griner is at home with her wife. Thank you.
I agree with you completely. Lynn, it's your turn for a minute.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. I don't have anything else to add, except to wonder what kind of work can we do to make this country better for all. Affirmative action is one of the tools. I don't think the Supreme Court really wants to make the country better for all. So that's a discouraging prospect. But I wish everyone, well, I guess we'll be here next week. So I'll save my Christmas wishes for next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy, it's your turn for a minute. Unmute, Cindy, please.
It was a good discussion. Thank you all. I grew up in the white South in North Carolina in the 50s, in a white world, though just across the field behind me and a big drainage ditch was the Black section of town. So you're always aware of it, and yet it didn't affect me. In college was my first encounter with Black students, and it was an interesting process. I would not trade my time in New Orleans, in the public schools, in my neighborhood, which is a bit mixed, not as much as I'd like, but it's been invaluable. Most people, and again, this is my big point, most white people in our country grow up in a white world. I suspect most Black people grow up in a almost Black world, not entirely, but almost. We're still so divided. I see Teresa shaking her head. She's from coastal North, or near the coast, North Carolina, which is where I grew up, a little bit north of there. It was a white world then, although the help was all Black. Again,
Cindy.
enough. Okay, good discussion. We need to go in lots of those.
Not enough, but enough time.
Right. Thank you.
So, Larry, it's your turn for a minute.
Yes, I would never argue or debate. I even try to puff myself up with scholastic knowledge or competing with someone based on who knows what, even from the standpoint of empirical knowledge or wisdom. Racism is or should be about respecting everyone's points of view, from the 10th grade dropout to the college educated PhD, so that we can all hear a diverse points of view. And this is not so much about who knows what. And if we keep that in mind, I think we could continue to have a good dialogue in Erace. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Glenn and then Teresa.
Well, if you know nothing, you have nothing to contribute. The Supreme Court is a reflection of the society we're in. The society we're in is dumbing down. They're not, the choices that were picked, they come in with their biases. And if they're not a balanced individual, they'll lean more to their So they would, well, if it's a political party, if they're Republican, they'll be leaning toward what the Republicans want. That's why we put Democrats on there, because we're hoping that they lean toward what the Democrats want. So it's just a reflection of the divided nation that's in conflict and cannibalizing each other.
Thank you,
That's it.
Glenn. Now, Teresa, for a minute.
Thank you. I put a book in the chat called Rising Out of Hatred. It's about David Duke's godson, Derek Black. It was a phenomenal read, first of all, but it still goes to the reason he renounced white supremacy was because he went to a liberal college and that had that exposure to other people and other ways of thinking. So I highly recommend that. And if we do away with the diversity, even at the university level, you're going to lose that phenomenon because this was a young man. Again, he was David Duke's godson, and someone from that very polarized, biased background could have what I would call a come to Jesus moment. I don't mean that in the religious, I know that has a religious connotation, but I'd even call that when, as a classroom teacher, a student turned the corner from being a ne'er-do-well to, okay, I'm going to focus and start studying. So we used to call that a come to Jesus moment, but he really did credit attending that particular college as opening his eyes to that.
Teresa, thanks.
Yes, sir.
I
Thank you.
I let you go a little longer, but
I appreciate it.
also saw an ad for the book about David Duke. I haven't looked at it closely, but I will sum up. I forgot the hardest part of being a facilitator is keeping your mouth shut, but I managed to do that. So,
I didn't get a chance to say my last word.
oh, I'm sorry, Greer. I apologize. I didn't see you on the screen, and now I do. So, Greer, you have a minute.
Okay, I'm just going to say this. America will never be great because it doesn't get the best from all its people. Because it wants to oppress a certain segment of the population. And it does it by using laws. Laws just make things legal. They don't make things right. And we could be a so much better country if the full potential of every individual was thought to be important. And until that happens, this is where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. I agree with what you said completely. I'm glad you spoke up, put that thought in. I also agree with Larry that the system that we generate the need for affirmative action is still in place. We still have a racist infrastructure in our country. But the reason I support, another reason I support infrastructure, affirmative action is because it benefits everyone. I was a benefit greatly from diverse student body. My daughters went to schools that supported affirmative action. One is a defendant, one of the schools is a defendant in the lawsuit. And I was very pleased when they went to college. Their college environment was more diverse than mine, even though I had a little bit of diversity in mine. And for my grandchildren, I want them to go to schools that have diversity, that expose them to other people besides themselves. So diversity, someone should be an endpoint diversity. They should never be an endpoint to diversity because we want to have diverse educational experiences. The reason why, my feeling is the reason why conservatives on the Supreme Court and conservatives in general don't support affirmative action, they only see it as a helping hand. They don't see the benefit of going to school or in a workplace where there's a diverse population, because they don't want to be going to school with Black people or brown people or people that are different than them. They would probably support segregation if they had the opportunity. So that's why they don't support affirmative action. They only see it as a helping hand. They don't see the benefit of diversity in general. And the 3 liberal judges pointed that out in the quote I read. So thanks to everyone and appreciate your comments. Thank you.